Nothing about this collision in Las Vegas is accidental, and that is what makes it so poisonous. On the surface, it begins like a familiar disaster in the Newman orbit, another emotional implosion fueled by old longing, reckless desire, and the kind of betrayal that always seems to find Adam no matter how many times he reinvents himself. But beneath that surface lies something far more calculated, a layered war of surveillance, humiliation, desire, manipulation, and revenge, with every player believing they are the smartest person in the room until the truth begins peeling away the masks one by one. What should have been a private scandal becomes an elaborate battlefield, where love is turned into evidence, vulnerability becomes strategy, and the need to win completely destroys whatever was left of trust. Chelsea does not arrive in Vegas because of instinct or coincidence. She arrives because she has already been hunting. For days she has tracked Adam's movements with a patience that says her hurt began long before the hotel room, long before the first suspicious silence, long before the first lie he told with his eyes instead of his mouth. By the time she gets close enough to confirm what she fears, she is no longer simply a woman desperate to save a relationship. She is a woman who has crossed into something darker, someone who has decided that if Adam is going to betray her, then she will not be the one left powerless in the aftermath. That decision changes everything. Chelsea is not only watching Adam in Vegas. She is building a case against him before the final betrayal has even fully happened. The message about room 2706 is not a clue she stumbles across in a moment of panic. It is bait she plants for herself, a false breadcrumb designed to become future-proof, a detail she can later hold up like a holy artifact and say that fate delivered the truth to her doorstep. But fate has nothing to do with it. This is premeditation disguised as heartbreak. That is what makes Chelsea so dangerous here. She is wounded, yes, but she is also active, strategic, and deeply unwilling to be cast as the naive woman who got played by Adam Newman once again. She knows his patterns too well, knows how his guilt often arrives too late, knows how his emotional evasions leave everyone around him carrying the weight of his confusion. So she decides, perhaps without even admitting it fully to herself at first, that this time she will control the narrative before he gets the chance. She will not merely catch him, she will frame the emotional crime scene in a way that leaves no room for his excuses. Las Vegas becomes the perfect setting for this descent because it is a city built on illusion, risk, performance, and the seduction of reinvention. Adam has always been drawn to places where identity feels negotiable, where old selves can be buried under neon and impulse. In Vegas, he is especially vulnerable to the version of himself that Chelsea fears most, the man who mistakes danger for freedom and intensity for truth. Riza enters that weakness like a practiced blade sliding between ribs. She is not flustered by exposure because she understands something Chelsea is only beginning to accept. The affair, if that is even a big enough word for what this is not just physical indiscretion. It is the result of a longer emotional campaign. Riza has not drifted into Adam's orbit by chance. She has learned how to position herself near men with money, fracture points, and unresolved hunger. She understands male loneliness, especially in powerful men who believe themselves too cynical to be conned. She knows how to let them think they are choosing her while quietly arranging every circumstance that makes the choice inevitable. What Chelsea discovers in that hotel is therefore more devastating than a single act of betrayal. She finds evidence of continuity. She finds confidence in Riza rather than shame, and that confidence tells her the connection did not begin in the room. It has history. It has momentum. It has perhaps even been growing in the blind spot Chelsea refused to examine because the alternative would have been too humiliating. That realization is the moment her pain mutates into something colder. She does not burst apart in the traditional way. She contracts. She becomes quieter, more focused, more frightening. While catching Adam with Riza should have been the end of uncertainty, it instead becomes the beginning of a plan. Chelsea plants a hidden camera in the room, and that choice says everything about the psychological terrain of the story. She is no longer just a betrayed partner. She is now a documentarian of betrayal, turning intimacy into leverage and emotion into archived ammunition. The camera becomes her revenge in embryo, her silent witness, her promise to herself that no one will rewrite what happened. Yet the real shock is that even then Chelsea is not fully in control, because Riza refuses the role of the exposed interloper. She meets Chelsea's fury with a nerve-shredding calm. the kind of poise that only comes from someone who has rehearsed danger many times before. She does not shrink. She does not plead. She does something much crueler. She implies longevity. She suggests history. She makes it clear that what Chelsea sees is only the visible tip of something older, deeper, and far more humiliating. In that moment, Chelsea realizes the true enemy may not be the affair itself, but the possibility that she has already been losing Adam for longer than she knew. The pain of betrayal is one thing. The pain of realizing one has been emotionally outdated for months, perhaps even longer, is another kind of wound entirely. It attacks pride, memory, and every tender effort once made to keep love alive. Chelsea's next move reveals just how far she is willing to go when heartbreak fuses with pride. She begins secretly investigating Riza and uncovers the outline of a woman who may not even be who she claims to be. The name, the past, the polished allure, all of it starts to look suspiciously curated. Chelsea digs into financial patterns, social connections, travel inconsistencies, and the shadows around Riza's history until one terrible possibility takes shape. Riza may be operating under a false identity, using carefully constructed seduction to gain access to wealthy men. For Chelsea, this discovery becomes both a lifeline and an obsession. It gives shape to her rage. It allows her to recast herself not as the discarded woman but as the one person smart enough to expose the con. It also offers something emotionally irresistible, the chance to prove that Adam was not leaving her for a more powerful love, but for a beautifully packaged fraud. That distinction matters immensely to Chelsea's wounded pride. If Adam truly chose another woman freely, then Chelsea must face the possibility that love failed. But if Adam was manipulated by a liar, then Chelsea can still imagine herself as the only real one in his life, the only person who ever understood him. This is where the story becomes more than a triangle. It becomes an ideological war between two women who weaponize truth differently. Chelsea wants exposure, but not pure exposure. She wants controlled exposure, the kind that humiliates Riza and vindicates herself in one devastating motion. Riza, by contrast, has built her power on adaptive identity, on being unreadable, on shaping herself according to what powerful men and bitter women least expect. Chelsea begins preparing not just to confront her, but to annihilate her publicly. She waits for a large party, the sort of glittering social event where the Newmans and their orbiting rivals gather under polished lights and pretend they are not circling one another's weaknesses. There, in a room full of status, judgment, and appetite for scandal, Chelsea detonates everything. She reveals the secrets she has collected about Riza's identity, her questionable past, the patterns that suggest predatory targeting of wealthy men. She does not merely accuse, she curates the moment like an execution. Within minutes, the atmosphere curdles. Admiration turns to suspicion. Curiosity becomes contempt. Riza, who thrives on image, finds her social armor stripped away in public. It is a brutal move, and in many ways, an effective one. Reputation in that world is currency, and Chelsea knows exactly where to strike. But victory curdles almost immediately because Adam's reaction is not the one she expected. He is stunned, yes. He sees in a flash that he may have been played, lured, studied, and used as part of a larger scheme. Any rational observer would think this should drive him back toward Chelsea, or at least toward shame, clarity, and distance from Riza. Instead, the opposite happens. Adam does what he so often does at his most maddening and self-destructive. He confuses emotional intensity with moral loyalty. Faced with Riza's exposure, he does not fully abandon her. On some level, perhaps because he sees in her deception a reflection of his own lifelong habit of compartmentalization and reinvention, he is drawn toward defending the very person who may have manipulated him. There is something almost pathological in that reflex. Adam has always been vulnerable to broken things that look like him. He mistakes their damage for intimacy. So even after Chelsea tears down Riza's facade, Adam continues gravitating toward her, as though the revelation of fraud only deepens the connection. For Chelsea, that is the moment everything inside her truly breaks. She can survive Adam's betrayal. She can survive the humiliation of being replaced. She can even survive the public ugliness of dragging another woman down. But what she cannot survive with any dignity intact is Adam seeing the truth and still leaning toward Riza. That choice turns all of Chelsea's effort into ashes. It suggests that this was never just about being tricked. It suggests Adam wanted the chaos. He wanted the danger. He wanted whatever Riza awakened in him, even if it came wrapped in lies. Chelsea's collapse is therefore not only romantic despair. It is a collapse of narrative control. She has spent days convincing herself that once the truth was exposed, reality would correct itself. Adam would recoil. He would finally see what Chelsea saw. He would understand who really cared, who really fought for him, who really knew him. Instead, he stands on the side of the woman who helped destroy her. That is not just rejection. It is invalidation so complete that it pushes Chelsea past reason. The leaked recording that surfaces afterward seems at first like the final nail in Riza's coffin. It appears to reveal that she planned to target Adam from the very beginning, that the romance was strategic from inception, that every smile and touch and intimate promise were part of a design. For a brief moment, it looks like Chelsea has been vindicated by undeniable proof. Adam is forced to hear what sounds like cold calculation in Riza's own voice. The room around him, whatever room he is standing in when the truth lands, must feel suddenly airless. This should be the moment when his denial finally shatters. But the story takes its darkest turn because the recording itself is not clean. It has been edited, cut, assembled to sharpen one meaning and erase another. And Chelsea is the architect of that forgery. This twist does not erase Riza's manipulations, but it contaminates Chelsea's case so thoroughly that the moral balance collapses. In trying to prove a lie, Chelsea becomes a liar of another kind. In trying to expose a predator, she turns herself into a strategist of distortion. The audience is left with the most painful truth of all. By the time this war reaches its peak, neither woman is fighting for honesty anymore. Both are fighting for dominance. That is where the psychological richness of the story deepens. Chelsea is not evil in a flat cartoonish sense. She is the product of old wounds, old insecurity, old patterns of needing to secure love before it slips away. Adam has been both her greatest emotional addiction and her most persistent source of instability for so long that the line between loving him and needing to win him has nearly vanished. When she manipulates evidence, she is not simply acting out of malice. She is acting out of terror, humiliation, and the desperate conviction that if the unedited truth is not enough to bring Adam back, then perhaps a sharper version of the truth will. That is how people lose themselves. Not all at once, not with full awareness, but step by step, each compromise feeling justified by how deeply they have been hurt. Chelsea starts by watching, then baiting, then recording, then exposing, then fabricating. Each move feels to her like a response to someone else's cruelty, until she looks up and realizes she has built an entire machine of manipulation around her own heartbreak. Riza's counterattack is savage precisely because it contains something undeniable. She reveals proof that Chelsea once faked illness in the past to manipulate Adam emotionally, weaponizing fragility to pull him back into orbit when he was slipping away. That revelation does more than embarrass Chelsea. It destroys the moral distance Chelsea had tried to place between herself and Riza. Suddenly, the room, the family, the city, perhaps even Adam himself, are forced to see Chelsea not as the faithful woman pushed too far, but as someone with her own history of deception, someone who has also shaped Adam's decisions through carefully staged vulnerability. This does not excuse Riza, it does not make her innocent, but it obliterates Chelsea's claim to moral purity. She becomes what is often most tragic in these stories, a woman telling the truth about someone else while lying about herself. Adam stands at the center of this chaos, not as a passive victim, but as a man whose own weaknesses invited every disaster. That must remain central for the story to breathe. It would be too easy to reduce him to the poor rich man seduced by a con artist and torn between two dangerous women. The more honest and more compelling version is that Adam wanted the emotional intensity each woman offered in different ways. Chelsea gave him history, forgiveness, and the illusion that someone could know his darkest self and still stay. Riza gave him reinvention, danger, and the thrill of being desired without the burden of old guilt. He moved toward each woman, not because he was helpless, but because each one fed a different hunger in him. That is why his choices are so devastating. He is not only manipulated, he is complicit in his own ruin. He ignores warning signs because he prefers emotional intoxication to clarity. He resents being controlled but repeatedly gravitates towards situations where control is disguised as love. By the time the secrets explode, Adam is not just shocked at what the women did. He is forced to confront what in him kept making this outcome possible. The Newman family fallout would be vicious. Victor would see the scandal not merely as a romantic disgrace, but as a contamination threat, another example of Adam allowing personal weakness to become a public vulnerability. Nikki would be disgusted by the emotional filth of it all, perhaps sympathetic to Chelsea's pain but deeply alarmed by her methods. Nick would likely judge Adam for once again dragging everyone into a crisis born of appetite and poor judgment. Sally, if she is anywhere near the blast radius, might see with grim clarity how Adam always creates storms and then behaves as though he is the only one drenched by them. No one around Adam could remain untouched because this scandal is too layered. It involves fake evidence, hidden cameras, false identity, emotional blackmail, and the familiar Newman problem of believing wealth can contain consequences that are fundamentally human. What makes Chelsea especially tragic in this version of the story is that her exposure of Riza is not wholly false. There is truth there. Riza has built herself through concealment. She has likely targeted Adam with intention. She may indeed have approached him as part of a predatory strategy. But Chelsea's decision to edit the recording ruins the purity of that truth, and that is a cruelly realistic detail. People driven by hurt often destroy their strongest case by overreaching. Chelsea cannot accept partial victory. She cannot bear the idea that the raw truth might not be enough to make Adam choose her. So she intensifies it, sharpens it, manipulates it, and in doing so she hands Riza a perfect opening. The war shifts. Now Riza is not just the exposed seductress. She becomes the woman who can claim she was framed, and in a world addicted to scandal, that ambiguity is enough to muddy everything. Riza, meanwhile, emerges as more than a glamorous schemer. Her composure under attack suggests a lifetime of adaptation. Women who invent themselves that thoroughly rarely do so for shallow reasons alone. Somewhere in her history may be deprivation, humiliation, abandonment, or a long lesson that honesty leaves women powerless while beauty and performance create access. That does not absolve her, but it gives her a psychological density that makes her more dangerous. She has likely survived by reading people quickly and becoming what they want just long enough to secure advantage. Adam, with his money, loneliness, and attraction to damaged intensity, was an ideal mark. Yet it would be too simple if she felt nothing. The most compelling version is that Riza did begin with a plan and then complicated her own mission by feeling something real. That internal fracture would explain why she does not flee when exposed, why she keeps fighting for space beside Adam, why she dares Chelsea so openly. It is not merely greed anymore. It is pride mixed with desire, and that combination is explosive. The hidden camera becomes a time bomb at the center of the plot, because once such a device exists, it never stays contained. Someone always gets access. Someone always leaks footage selectively. Perhaps pieces of the hotel encounter begin circulating, but without full context, turning private collapse into public spectacle. Perhaps Adam sees Chelsea at her coldest, calmly positioning the device after the confrontation, and realizes this was never only about pain. Perhaps Chelsea herself replays the footage in secret, torturing herself with images she hates but cannot stop watching, because grief often becomes ritual when people have no idea what else to do with it. The camera is not just a plot device. It is a symbol of how everyone here has stopped living love and started curating evidence of it. The relationship is over, the moment intimacy becomes content for future war. What follows is not resolution, but escalation. Chelsea, stripped of the righteousness she depended on, becomes more volatile because the exposure of her own past manipulations threatens to permanently redefine her in Adam's eyes. Riza, though wounded socially, gains tactical ground because now she can paint herself as the target of a woman unraveling. Adam, disgusted and fascinated in equal measure, drifts deeper into confusion, unable to cleanly choose because clean choices require a moral clarity he has never mastered. Every new revelation makes the previous one less stable. Every attempt to seize control backfires. Every person insists they were only reacting to someone else's betrayal, yet all three are actively manufacturing new betrayals in real time, and that is the true darkness of the storyline. It is not about which woman deserves Adam. It is about how desire, fear, and pride rot into strategy, when nobody is willing to lose with dignity. Chelsea cannot accept abandonment, so she tries to script justice. Riza cannot accept exposure, so she weaponizes Chelsea's old sins. Adam cannot accept the consequences of his appetites, so he keeps searching for emotional absolution in the very people helping destroy him. The result is a spiral in which truth becomes almost impossible to separate from performance. Every confession sounds strategic. Every tear looks rehearsed. Every revelation contains just enough truth to wound and just enough distortion to corrupt. By the time the dust settles, Las Vegas has done what it does best. It has turned desire into disaster and left everyone staring at themselves under a merciless light. Chelsea is no longer just the betrayed woman. She is a strategist who crossed ethical lines so serious that even her pain cannot excuse them. Riza is no longer just the seductive outsider. She is a survivor, a manipulator, perhaps even a woman who almost convinced herself she could build something real out of a scheme. Adam is no longer the man between two women. He is the unstable center of a storm he helped create. A man finally forced to face the truth that his deepest weakness is not lust or confusion, but his addiction to emotional chaos itself. In the end, no one wins. Chelsea's public destruction of Riza does not restore her dignity. Riza's counterattack does not cleanse her motives. Adam's choice, whichever direction it appears to lean in a given moment, does not bring peace because it is built on the wreckage of trust. The affair, the fake message, the hidden camera, the false identity, the edited recording, the resurfaced history of manipulation, each piece adds up to something far uglier than infidelity. It becomes a study in what happens when people stop trying to love one another honestly and start trying to defeat one another emotionally. That is why the story feels so dangerous. It is not just romantic scandal. It is psychological warfare wearing the face of heartbreak. And perhaps the cruelest final note is this. Chelsea may have begun her campaign believing she was exposing a liar and reclaiming a man she loved, but in trying to trap Adam with proof, she proves something far more painful about herself. She has spent so long trying to secure love from someone fundamentally unstable that she has adopted instability as her own language. Riza may have entered Adam's world under a false name, but Chelsea entered this war under a false sense of moral certainty. Adam may recoil from both of them eventually, but even that would not free him, because once a man has been loved through surveillance, seduced through disguise, and defended through forgery, he can never again pretend he did not help build the conditions for that ruin. This is not a story about one betrayal. It is about layered betrayal, mutual contamination, and the terrifying ease with which love becomes a battlefield when pride is stronger than truth.